comes Hurst. He's got some fiddler on the pitch. They think it's all over. It is now. It's four.
England are world champions. The country that gave football to the world had finally conquered it. But that was the last time. After that, every tournament began the same way. Expectation, a good side, a chance. Yet more often than not, it ended the same way too. A single moment, a decision, a game that turned. And over time, those moments started to add up. This is the story of England's long hurt, the hope that kept returning, and the pain that never quite left.
England will win the World Cup in 1966.
Alf Ramsey had already said back in 1963, shortly after taking charge, England would win the World Cup. And so he was proved right. In 1966, England wasn't just champions on the pitch. The country was at the centre of the world. London was the fashion capital. The Beatles, Rolling Stones ruled the charts, captured a new, confident spirit. Ramsey was ahead of his time. He evolved the team tactically, moving away from traditional formations to a 4-3-3. Then after the group stage, boldly switching to a now legendary wingless wonders formation. England had a golden generation. Gordon Banks in goal, the imperious Bobby Moore and Jack Charlton at the back, Nobby Stiles winning the ball in midfield, Bobby Charlton pulling the strings, and Geoff Hurst up front. Even Jimmy Greaves, arguably England's greatest goalscorer, was injured early in the tournament and never fully regained his place in the starting 11. For one glorious summer, everything aligned. Bobby Moore lifting the Jules Rimet trophy on that sunlit Wembley afternoon felt like the beginning of something special.
Right, Ian?
Yes,
How do you feel about the game?
Oh, delighted, naturally.
How do you feel now?
Oh, over the world. Over the world. All right.
Well done, Alan.
How do you feel about the game?
Fabulous.
Any worrying moments? Any worrying moments?
I thought I was invincible until they scored the first goal and they proved me wrong.
So where did it all go wrong? England qualified comfortably by topping their group. Based on results from the British Home Championships, they faced reigning European champions Spain in the quarter-finals and progressed smoothly, winning 1-0 at home for a Charlton goal, followed by a 2-1 victory in Madrid. Back then, the finals was small, and only 4 teams actually made it. England arrived tired. Bobby Charlton had only lifted the European Cup with Man United the week before, and a warm-up friendly against West Germany had proved costly. Geoff Hurst and Nobby Stiles both picked up injuries. In Florence, they met a skillful but highly physical Yugoslav team. The game was feisty from the first whistle, both teams kicking each other relentlessly, and substitutions weren't allowed back then. With England trailing 1-0 to a late goal, and just minutes remaining, frustration boiled over, and Alan Mullery, fed up with constant aggression, lashed out, kicked his opponent. He became the first England player ever sent off in 425 internationals. The world champions were out. In the other semi-final, hosts Italy drew 0-0 with the Soviet Union after extra time, and the tie was decided by a coin toss in the changing room. This was before penalty shootouts existed. Italy went on to win the tournament on home soil. And England, however, did beat the Soviet Union in a third-place playoff 2-0. England arrived in Mexico as one of the pre-tournament favourites, alongside Brazil. And fate drew the two giants together in the same group. Many believe this England squad was even stronger than 1966 winners. But before the campaign even started, controversy struck. Captain Bobby Moore was falsely accused of stealing a bracelet in a jewellery store in Colombia during a pre-tournament friendlies. This incident became known as Jewellery Gate. far from idle preparations for the so-called group of death containing Brazil, Romania and Czechoslovakia. Another issue was training at altitude with only thin air to breathe.
You've just had a 50-yard sprint and you're still panting some minutes after it. Does it really take it out of you, a real run?
You can do what you want, you can run, but just recovering is a little bit difficult.
But England's first game and opened their group campaign with a gritty 1-0 win over Romania.
England against Brazil. Pele, Jairzinho, Bobby Moore, Bobby Charlton. What a prospect.
Then came the match the whole tournament had been waiting for. England versus Brazil. The game would be played at midday. The temperatures soared to 37 degrees. The first half produced one of the best saves ever.
Only the Cooper standing. Pele! What a save! Good back!
At half-time, mind games set in. Brazil made England wait on the pitch before entering and resuming the second half.
Costello, and again Bobby Moore in there to stop him. What a superb bloke to have in your side.
Still regard that as the clash of the real final of the 1970 World Cup. Years later, Pele would remark on that extraordinary game. I hit the header exactly as I hoped. I couldn't believe when I saw. Even now when I watch it, I can't believe it. And Zagallo also talked about that game years later. That was the real final. We knew that Brazil and England were the best two teams. The game had everything. The tackle by Bobby Moore, the save by Banks, the dribble by Tostão. People still talk about these decades later. England would finish second in the group after beating Czechoslovakia 1-0, with Alan Clark scoring the winner. The quarterfinals set up against West Germany once again. The heat remained brutal. To add to that, Gordon Banks was ruled out with food poisoning, so Peter Bonetti started in goal. England began superbly, going 1-0 up before half-time with Alan Mullery. The second half started just as well, Martin Peters doubling the lead. Franz Beckenbauer pulled one back with a Bonetti mistake in goal. Alf Ramsey then made a controversial decision, substituting Bobby Charlton.
Really now, under terrible pressure. Later. A goal! And England are now struggling, and a match they've never looked like losing.
The game went to extra time, and despite Ramsey's rallying cry, England wilted in the heat. Gerd Müller scored the winner. The defending world champions were out. Brazil went on to win the World Cup. But back home, questions were asked about Ramsey's decisions. And for Bobby Charlton, 106 caps for England with 49 goals, this was the end. His last game ever for England. Following the heartbreak of Mexico 1970, Sir Alf Ramsey turned his attention to England's next major test, the 72 Euro Championship. In qualifying, England topped their group comfortably, but in the quarter-finals, still effectively at qualifying stage, they faced West Germany once again, the same side that had knocked them out only 2 years previous in dramatic fashion. Many in England still believe the 1970 defeat had more to do with the heat, the altitude, and unfortunate goalkeeping and substitution errors than Germany simply being the better team. This time, however, the West German side had improved dramatically. They were entering a golden era, both at international and club level, spearheaded by the likes of Franz Beckenbauer, Gerd Müller, Sepp Maier, Günter Netzer. The first leg at Wembley was a painful night. A rampant West Germany put England to the sword, winning 3-1. England restored some pride in the away leg in Berlin with a much improved performance, holding Germany to a 0-0 draw, but the tie was already lost on aggregate. West Germany would go on to the finals in Belgium and win the 1972 European Championships in impressive fashion. For England, cracks were clearly appearing in Sir Alf Ramsey's side, and his reluctance to promote fresh talented players was becoming harder to ignore. After the Euros, attention turned to the qualifying for the 74 World Cup. England were drawn in a group with Poland and a relatively weak Wales side, whose main threat was Liverpool's John Toshak. On paper, qualification looked like a formality, but Sir Alf Ramsey was already on borrowed time. His abrasive style had only been tolerated while he was winning. A tactical pioneer who ditched wingers to win the 1966 World Cup now looked increasingly outdated. Performances had become more functional than convincing. England was still good, but no longer feared. Ramsey's great strengths, control, discipline, structure, were increasingly viewed as rigid, predictable, and a lack of imagination. England got off the mark with a Colin Bell winner against Wales. The return fixture was frustrating. Toshak took the lead for Wales, but Norman Hunter levelled for England for a 1-1 draw.
Bell. This time it's Hunter.
Also, around this time, Gordon Banks' career would be cut short. A car accident damaging his sight. Most of the 66 World Cup winners had moved on by now, though Alan Ball, Martin Peters and an ageing Bobby Moore remained. Next up was Poland away, and Ramsey openly declared he was seeking just a point, a comment many interpret as negative and defeatist.
Would you like England to win?
I'm not sure. Obviously patriotism says yes, England must win, but I think it would be much better for football if England lose.
Why do you say that?
Well, because football's in trouble at the moment in this country, and it's in trouble because of the consequences of that 1966 World Cup win, the tactical moves that have come in, the defensive play, the destructive play. It's become a boring game to watch, and I'd trace a lot of that to England's World Cup success.
Now, Terry Venables, as someone who's represented England at every level, do you think it would do them good to lose on Wednesday?
No, not at all, no. I have to disagree completely everything that's been said here.
Gadoka with a kick. Swinging in and touched in. Vanash. McFarland. Moore. Oh, in trouble. Leboinski. Moore was too casual. 2-0.
The game ended 2-0, and Moore, once England's rock, now looked like a great player in decline. Under mounting pressure, Ramsey dropped Moore for the decisive return fixture at Wembley on the 17th of October 73.
Is underway. Poland kicking off. Chip forward on the far post is McFarland! Must have hit the post!
England bombarded the Polish goal with 34 shots on target and 26 corners, but could not find the breakthrough.
Hughes for Curry to try one. That one's on target. And now Shannon. Wow!
And to make matters worse,
The Docker's over there. The shot is on for Demarsky. Oh, and he scored! Demarsky's got a goal. 1-0 Poland.
England rallied and won a penalty.
Mamachevsky. Shilton can't even look at all, though. Clark, he's got it. Hunter, right foot. Was Peters. Keegan got in the way. Bell. And he cannons away. Saki kicks it off the line. Time now. No, they have not. It's over. It's all over. And for England, one of the blackest days they've ever had. Sir Alf Ramsey must be a very disheartened man.
For Poland, they went to the 74 World Cup in West Germany, and they reached the semi-finals. For England, it was a sad end, as Bobby Moore retired from international football shortly after. And but for Sir Alf Ramsey, the writing was on the wall. The FA waited 6 long months before finally sacking him in May '74. The architect of England's finest hour had been overtaken by time. Joe Mercer stepped in as caretaker manager for 7 games, while the search for a successor begun. Many fans and pundits clamoured for the charismatic and outspoken Brian Clough, who had been vocal in his criticism of the Poland result and Ramsey's cautious approach. Clough was seen by supporters as the dynamic attacking voice English football needed. However, the FA chose Don Revie. Fresh from winning the league with Leeds United, Revie was seen as the safe, organised choice, valued for his meticulous planning and man management. The FA wanted stability over Clough's unpredictable and confrontational style.
Hall. Keegan! Body pieces, he wasn't offside. Smith. Yes! Keegan second!
Kevin Keegan, England's new world star, and he would lead the country for the next decade. Yet under Don Revie, England remained frustratingly inconsistent. In the qualifiers for Euro 76 in Yugoslavia, England started strongly, hammering Czechoslovakia 3-0 at Wembley.
Here's Shannon getting out! To Bell. And they're queuing at the far post. Bell!
However, they could only manage draws home and away against Portugal, and a painful 2-1 defeat in Bratislava against the Czechs left them in second place, missing the tournament once again. Czechoslovakia topped the group and went on to win the tournament. The '78 World Cup in Argentina simply had to be reached.
If I feel in the back of my mind that I'm going to fail, then I shouldn't have taken the job, being very honest. I'm a type of person that believes that we are going to win the World Cup in '78. And if I didn't feel that, then I shouldn't be doing the job.
Revie struggled to instill the tight-knit camaraderie he had built at Leeds United onto the national side. He rotated a large number of players and never quite settling on a consistent 11. Drawn in a qualifying group alongside Italy, and only one team would qualify for the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, it was vital for England to do well in the away trip to Rome. Revie shuffled the team once again, and only 5 had played in the previous match, and it showed.
Antonioni, tiro, 1 Inghilterra 0. Antonioni, di Benetti, cross di Benetti, Bettega, 2-0.
After the painful 2-0 defeat in Rome, England were once again at serious risk of missing out on the World Cup. The following year, Revie secretly agreed a hugely lucrative 4-year contract to UAE while the team were on tour in South America. On the 12th of July '77, he sensationally resigned by selling his story exclusively to the Daily Mail. The FA only learnt of it when the newspaper hit the streets. He promptly jetted off to the Gulf for a deal worth $340,000 tax-free, dwarfing his England salary. The FA was outraged and attempted to ban him from English football for 10 years for bringing the game into disrepute. It was a messy, bitter split that left Revie largely ostracised from the domestic game for years. He always insisted he jumped before he was pushed. Nearly everyone wanted me out, so I'm giving them what they want. With Revie gone, the FA turned to a successor. Once again, Brian Clough won the public vote.
Do you feel that what you've done for Forest you could do with the England side?
I think managing a side, whether it's England, Forest or Hartlepool, that's where Peter and I started, it is the same thing. Management's essential in any football club, however big or however small. And I feel the Football Association should have the best manager. And please don't ask me who that is.
But the FA rejected him. Ron Greenwood would take over, though initially as caretaker. Next up was away to Luxembourg. England needed a big victory to stay in realistic contention. yet they could only win 2-0. And Italy then thrashed Finland 6-1, leaving England in a desperate need of a miracle. The Italians sat level on points with England, but with a better goal difference and a game in hand. England would have to beat Italy convincingly at Wembley.
A bit of the action wide, but Brooking curling that in again towards Kevin Keegan! The England goal that we wanted, and Keegan is the scorer! And Wilkins has gone wide for him as well. A little flick through there now for Brooking! That's number 2 for England by Trevor Brooking!
England atoned for the defeat in Rome with a fine display at Wembley. Yet Italy still won their final game comfortably at Luxembourg, and England were eliminated on goal difference. Looking back on the 1970s, England had a bundle of maverick talent that managers seemed too reluctant to fully embrace. Too many good players got too few caps. Under Greenwood, now full-time manager, England began to play with more venture and freedom. Signs were positive as they qualified for the '80 Euro Championships in Italy. It looked as though the national team had finally turned a corner, ending the problems of failing to qualify for 4 successive major tournaments. However, England were about to face a new and far uglier problem, one that would cast a long shadow. Ron Greenwood had installed some new belief into the squad, and they looked in good shape, beating the world champions Argentina in a friendly in preparation for the Euros.
Couple, Keegan! Oh, what a strike! Marvellous play!
There was also a young Maradona playing, with certain elements of foreshadowing for what to come.
2, and that is a penalty. Maradona again. And he's taking the ball on! And it's gone wide, but what a marvellous example of this man's ability.
For Greenwood, England looked in good shape. However, the current 2-time Ballon d'Or winner and England captain, Keegan, just come off an exhausting season with Hamburg, and endless commercial commitments had taken its toll. His knee ligaments were giving cause for concern. Greenwood would also be without his first choice striker, a ruptured Achilles ruling out Forest's $1 million man, Trevor Francis. England's group would consist of hosts Italy alongside Spain and Belgium. And in the first game against Belgium, England got off to a great start, Ray Wilkins scoring first. However, moments later, Belgium equalised. But almost immediately, fighting broke out behind England's goal. Italian police fired tear gas into the crowd as yellow smoke clouded the terraces, and police waded into the England fans. It also affected the people on the pitch. All of a sudden, for no apparent reason, my eyes started to water. A horrible feeling came over me and I couldn't see anything. Then I realised there was a problem behind me. The game resumed and England had a goal wrongly disallowed. It ended 1-1, a disappointing draw, though the result wasn't the main talking point. The hooligans were. We're ashamed of people like this. We've done everything to create the right impression here. UEFA hit the FA with an £8,000 fine for crowd disturbances. For the second game, against host Italy, Greenwood kept up his strategy of alternating goalkeepers between Shilton and Clements. And in the second half, a lone goal from Tardelli, and Shilton was unable to do anything, left England losing 1-0 to the hosts, Italy. And for Greenwood, the knives were out. Though the team did manage to win their last game 2-1 against Spain, and Ray Clements saving a penalty. But for Greenwood, the honeymoon period was definitely over. And for the World Cup qualifiers ahead of Spain 1982, England made painful work of it. After 5 games, they had just 2 wins, with a damaging draw and a defeat against Romania, and another slip against Switzerland that left the campaign stalling. Then came a must-win trip to Hungary in Budapest.
In again now for McDermott. Can he cross it in there? Brooking! And it's there! Oh, brilliant. Once more, but maybe he'll try and find Koppel down that flank. No, it's in here for Keegan. Played back for Brooking. Terrific goal! A terrific goal by Brooking, and England are back in the lead. Look at the ball caught up in the corner there. Positive 3-1 lead. Can Keegan do it? Yes, he can!
England won 3-1, a performance full of fight that seemed to drag the campaign back into life. But just as momentum built, it collapsed again. 2-1 shocking defeat away to Norway, one of the most infamous in England's history, summed up by the Norwegian commentator.
Norge har slått England 2-1 i fotball. Vi best i verden. Vi best i verden. Vi har slått England 2-1 i fotball. Det aldeles utrolig. Vi har slått England. England, kjempers fødeland. Lord Nelson, Lord Beaverbrook, Sir Winston Churchill, Maggie Thatcher. Your boys took a hell of a beating. Your boys took a hell of a beating.
With one game left, England were on the brink, with Hungary and Romania better placed, with games in hand, and it felt like it had slipped away again. But while Hungary kept picking up points, Romania fell apart, beaten at home by Switzerland, then held to a goalless draw. The fallout was brutal. Their manager, Stefan Kovac, the man who had won 2 European Cups with Ajax, dismissed along with the rest of the coaching staff. That collapse handed England a lifeline. All they needed now was a result at Wembley against already qualified Hungary.
And the referee blows his whistle, and England are back in the World Cup finals for the first time since 1970. And Kevin Keegan won't mind the bang in the mouth, because he's led England out of the wilderness now, and at last we've got something to bite on.
But preparations for the finals were terrible. The timing of the FA Cup final and its replay, plus Aston Villa's European Cup final in Rotterdam, clashed badly with England's warm-up games. Tottenham Ray Clements was tied up at Wembley, which left Peter Shilton to play both friendlies, effectively handing him the #1 goalkeeping spot for the tournament. Another Tottenham player, Glenn Hoddle, fresh from scoring the FA Cup final replay winner for Spurs, joined the squad late, giving the management an excuse to limit his involvement. And Aston Villa's Tony Morley, at the peak of his powers after setting up the winning goal in the European Cup final, was left out of the squad altogether. To make matters worse, 2 of England's key men, Kevin Keegan and Trevor Brooking, arrived carrying injuries. They were racing against the clock just to play any part. Added to all that, the Falklands War had begun between Britain and Argentina. At one point, there was serious doubt over whether the home nations would even travel to Spain. And when England did arrive, they received a hostile reception from the locals, with Spain backing Argentina's claim. Still, the tournament started like a dream in Bilbao against France. Bobby Robson scored after 27 seconds.
And a goal! Robson!
He added another.
And Robson makes it 2-1 here!
And Paul Mariner made it 3-1. England had a sensational victory over Platini's France. England topped their first round group with wins over Czechoslovakia and Kuwait, with Trevor Francis scoring in both games. Yet creative talents like Hoddle barely got a look in. As group winners, they were drawn in a nightmare second round group, West Germany and hosts Spain. Tense 0-0 against the Germans left it all to do on the final match, as Germany beat Spain 2-1. For Keegan, the dream of playing in a World Cup was slipping away. However, after a physio trip back to Hamburg, he was back, partially fit, and made the bench. England needed to beat Spain by 2 clear goals to reach the semi-finals. The showdown will be in the Bernabeu. Going into the second half, the game was still 0-0. With 20 minutes to go, Greenwood rolled the dice.
Is for the arrival of Keegan and Brooking.
And Brooking and Keegan almost made the difference.
And a chance for Brooking! Keegan has gone right to the penalty spot. That's nice. This is Robson. Keegan pulls away and gets the header, and it's wide!
And England had failed to score and win, and were out of the tournament. no one will know what a fit Kevin Keegan or Trevor Brooking could have done, or a Hoddle who was tragically overlooked.
All dreamed about playing in the final. I think we had a great chance. If someone had said we just had to beat Spain, really, and then France to get to a World Cup final, and with the Brazilians going out today, the only team that possibly were a little bit better than everyone else, to be fair, but, you know, we had a great chance.
After the World Cup, Bobby Robson took over as England manager. He had taken a provisional club, Ipswich Town, to the FA Cup and UEFA Cup glory, and coming agonisingly close to the league title, a remarkable achievement for a provincial club. And English football itself was at a peak. English clubs had dominated Europe, winning the last 6 European Cups. Yet, at international level, England continued to fall short. Robson first went to go and see Newcastle's new signing and England captain, Kevin Keegan. Keegan making his debut and scoring the winner. Afterwards, the two spoke, and Robson hinting he'd be in the England fold. But when the squad was announced, Keegan was missing.
What upset me was the way I heard about it. I mean, a 10p phone call from the FA is not a lot to ask. I found out it through you people, through the media. And that's what annoyed me, not the fact I'm left out. I'm big enough to accept that, you know, that at 31, as I said, you know, and a new manager, he's got new ideas.
Robson, determined to rebuild with younger players. His first test was qualification for UEFA Euro 84, but it quickly unravelled. A draw away in Denmark was followed by a damaging 1-0 defeat at Wembley. The Danes featured a young Michael Laudrup. England were out and Robson offered his resignation. The FA refused, and instead, a tour of Brazil followed. And there, everything changed. In Brazil, a young John Barnes announced himself to the world.
Inside Leandro, he could let one go here. He certainly could let one go. He keeps it on his right foot. He's
gliding past defenders to score a stunning solo goal. That hinted at something England had been missing. And from that moment, the mood shifted. And once England were back, they made qualification for the 86 World Cup easy work.
Hately, Barnes, Hately again, and he's made a chance here, has Hately, and he's scored. Wilkins is in there, and Robson, what a goal! What is onside? 1-0.
While also finding their next star striker, Gary Lineker. Mexico. England had been here before, just like in 1970. The heat and altitude were going to be a problem. Yet there was quiet optimism about England's chances of doing well. At the same time, English football as a whole was at a new low. The country's clubs were serving a 5-year ban from European competitions, imposed by UEFA after the escalating hooligan problem that had plagued the game in recent years. This culminated in the awful and tragic Heysel Stadium disaster in 1985 in the European Cup final. UEFA had decided enough was enough, with Liverpool receiving an additional 1-year ban. For Bobby Robson, he had a mixture of players now in their prime, with captain Brian Robson alongside Glenn Hoddle, Peter Shilton, Peter Beardsley, Ray Wilkins, Gary Lineker. The squad also featured a promising talent, John Barnes and Chris Waddle. However, there was a concern over the captain. Brian Robson was still suffering with a shoulder injury, and it was something of a gamble whether he would be fit. The campaign began with frustration. England lost their opening group match, 1-0 to Portugal, Against Morocco, Bobby Robson gambled on Brian Robson's fitness. He took a chance on his captain and lost. Robson went down with a dislocated shoulder early in the game, and that was the end of his World Cup. Then it got even worse. Wilkins, with an act of petulance, got sent off. The first red card for an England player at a World Cup, losing both captain and vice-captain in the same game, left England with 10 men. They held on for a 0-0 draw, but with one game left, qualification looked in serious doubt.
And I'm cursing everything that's gone wrong for us, because 2 years of work has sort of disappeared, but we're still very much in contention. We have to beat the Poles. If we do that, we've got 3 points, and I think there'll be a good chance of winning.
Lineker far side, coming in on it now! Magnificent goal! Winacek closes it, and Lineker says thank you very much.
It was pure relief. England advanced to the knockout stage as runners-up in their group. A good win over Paraguay followed with a brace from Lineker. The 3-0 victory put England in the last 8 against Argentina and Maradona. It would also be the first meeting between the two nations since the Falklands War 4 years earlier.
Don't waste time on questions like that. Don't ask me anything regarding the diplomatic situation, okay, or the political situation. We're here to play this. Don't confuse the two issues, all right? So don't waste my time.
You've got to take special measures for special players, and I think Platini and Maradona are the two special players in the world who you can't ignore them at your peril.
Who have you got in England saying you'd like to see doing that job?
Well, possibly Stevens, if he seems to like Stevens.
I think Maradona would destroy him.
The first half was a slow affair, but that all changed in the second half, as Maradona scored 2 very different goals that will be remembered forever. The cheat and the magic. Maradona's combination of cunning and brilliance had proved decisive. 20 years on from that glorious World Cup win at Wembley in '66, England had spent many of those years in the wilderness, with only limited success on the international stage. English football was never more isolated, still feeling the effects of club bans and the shadows of recent events. Yet hope flickered. And of course, England expects.